Hello, Internet. Gino, that Pinguino Grieco here again with another episode of Deep Listens. And today, it's time for Five-stasy. Final Fantasy V, y'all. We're back.
Sometimes your alliterations are good and on point, and sometimes your consonants, like, it's bad. This is a bad one.
This one's bad? Five for fighting.
Fantastic Five or Fantastic Four. No, wait, that's exactly what you do.
Five-will fantasy. No.
That's exactly, oh, man.
We'll find it.
We'll find it.
Whatever we found will be what the name of this podcast is.
There's no sexual innuendo for this podcast, please.
Was there one that was?
Balls deep.
Ah, yes. That's fair. That's true. I did that. That was a mistake. Whoops. And now, years later, still a mistake. I am joined, as always, on this terrible journey. Though this is not an especially terrible journey. Final Fantasy V is a good game. By Chris ZombiePie Redacted.
Hey, everybody. I'm glad to be here in another blood pact to finish a Final Fantasy game, as always. And this time it seems like this blood pact is not going to kill me slowly inside. It's a Final Fantasy game, so you know what that means. It's time for ZP's food review. So for those that don't know, I usually try something on the zeitgeist. I'm trying to be healthy. So I ended up, because I thought it would be a good life decision, I bought microwavable pasta with sauce. And this is
you definitely
Alfredo. Hey, here's the healthy part. 100% vegetable-made pasta.
Oh, okay.
Pasta made with spinach and lentils. I get 1 serving of vegetables per serving, and there are no artificial ingredients.
What is this?
However, when I look
sauce?
at the pasta sauce is Alfredo. It's garlic pepper. I'm looking at this. Already I can tell it kind of smells a little fishy. Also, just going to put that out there. It's saying that it's healthy. It's 35% per container of saturated fat and 27% of sodium. And I'm getting 40% of my iron and 25% of my potassium. So that's the good news.
Well, I'm glad that someone put metal shavings into this.
All right. So let's try this. I got to say, microwavable pasta, it's kind of congealed into one blob.
Who made this?
It is called Bird's Eye.
Oh, goody.
It's got a seal of quality, like a quality thing.
Why are you doing this? Also, that other voice we heard, that's Jeff Rudd. He's back for this.
Right.
My review's next.
Oh, no.
So I get it's spinach and lentils combined. So you would think that the pasta would be like green. It's more brown and pale gray. I'm going to eat some more of this, and then I'll talk.
Okay. Jeff, how are you doing?
I am well. Glad you guys let me come on to the program again to play another old game. This is good. I've spent a lot of time playing Final Fantasy 4 and 6 over the years. This is the first time I've really delved into 5.
Oh.
And I'm really kicking myself now, because,
Gino,
hey, this is really good.
You're an Italian-American.
Yes.
You're one of them there Italians.
Yes, what do you want to know?
The texture of pasta, the texture of pasta,
yes,
it shouldn't crumble like it's a potato chip, right?
No. We call that al dente.
And it also shouldn't be gummy, right?
I mean, it should have a little bit of chew to it, but not...
This sounds a little bit like chickpea pasta I've had, which is like a thing that is okay to eat, but is kind of a separate product, and I feel like is not great to... It's like the same thing I have with like nut-based beverages, which I have a hard time calling nut milk, but I have no problem with them existing, milk. And I think they're fine. Like
I
almond
really don't like almond milk.
When you were saying when you were saying nut-based beverages, I was thinking someone made like a Coca-Cola that was made of almonds or something.
I mean, that's a little much, but I mean, I don't know. I drink a lot of dairy milk, but I have a partner who does not.
I'm just going to put this out there.
Both. Anyway.
The microwave is not a place to cook pasta.
It's fair.
Because it's like cooked unevenly. There are parts that are like overcooked and parts that are undercooked.
Great.
The parts that are overcooked are basically clay. The ones that are undercooked like immediately disintegrate when they touch my tongue, which is a weird thing that pasta should not do. I mean, the flavoring in terms of the sauce is very basic. It's garlic and
is the sauce at
pepper.
least acceptable?
Once it came out of the microwave, it immediately solidified and kind of like congealed onto it and got absorbed by the pasta. And so there's literally no sauce. Yeah, this is a bad thing.
Great. So, that's fun.
I give that, I'm going to say a light 2. Maybe a 1.5.
Out of how many?
5.
Excellent. Well, on my side of things, I'm not going to do that to myself. I don't have a segment for today because I don't do segments for the Final Fantasy podcast because this is serious. This podcast is serious. It's about ranking the best Final Fantasy games. And since we are starting a new one, let us revisit the list, the one true list.
Before we do, my brief segment, it is winter, so I've bought a 6-pack of Deschutes Jubile Ale, which is what I drink in the winter. It is a winter ale that is made in Deschutes, Oregon. It is a nice dark beer. So Jeff's appearance today is fueled by Jubile Ale. Not sponsored, just a happy customer.
What's the percentage of that joint?
Ooh, off the top of my head, don't know. 6.7. 65
moderate.
IBUs.
That's not bad.
Engine oil dark.
Well, are you jubilant when you're done drinking it?
I am jubilant to hear about this Final Fantasy ranked list.
Gino, you're almost shooting like you're Russell Westbrook on the Rockets.
Or Russell Westbrook in the last 4 or 5 years of his career.
Yeah, dude, if we want to talk about it.
But
which we don't.
We don't.
Final Fantasy list.
Yes, to start, here is our current Final Fantasy list. In first, the greatest Final Fantasy, Final Fantasy IX. Then the second greatest Final Fantasy, Final Fantasy X. Followed by 7, 8, 12, Final Fantasy TCG, and then there's a steep decline to FF1, FF10-2, Final Fantasy The Spirits Within the movie, Mobius Final Fantasy, then another precipitous drop to Mobius, Final Fantasy X-2 Last Mission, Final Fantasy II, and then the worst Final Fantasy of all, Final Fantasy XIII, Forever, never to be outdone. And now
you don't know that, Gino. Everything that Jeff has said about Final Fantasy 15 makes it suggest that it's an even bigger pile of crap.
It might be, but it will be hard for it to be as much of a pile of crap as 13 is.
For as long as it's going to take us to ever look at that one, I'll just say preemptively, I don't know if it's worse than Final Fantasy 13, but it's far more disappointing.
Oh, I don't know. I waited a lot of years for 13, and it was...
That's fair.
It was very bad, and it was very bad for a decade.
I don't know. We'll get into it.
We'll get to it eventually. But now we need to talk about a good Final Fantasy game, Final Fantasy V. So before we get into that, just a reminder.
13-2?
Nope. Just a reminder, before we get started, you can support this show on patreon.com/deeplistens, and that will get you access to our Discord, where ZP yells about food things all the time. And we also discuss...
Gino and I have had no less than maybe 2 to 3 basketball beefs since the last Final Fantasy podcast.
It's true. So you can get in on that. You can talk with the hosts of the show, your favorite hosts. You can talk with other members of the community, of which there are several. And you can support us, and that's just super awesome. We appreciate it very much. If you want to email in, write in, you can do so at deeplistenspod on Twitter, deeplistens.libsyn.com. We've got comment sections, and deeplistenspodcast@gmail.com. That's our email address, where you can write in questions or comments. You can also
we're getting closer to the GOTY time of the year, so get in your comments, questions, emails.
Yep. We need to figure out which is the best game that we've played this year. We'll get there. So now, without further ado, let's talk about Final Fantasy V. Jeff, as you are something of an old games nerd, what tell us about this old game?
Possibly a hardcore old games nerd.
a hardcore old games nerd. Right, so Final Fantasy V.
Video game historian.
And historian, yes. Okay, so Final Fantasy V is a December 1992 joint from a company called Square. This was a Hironobu Sakaguchi directed Final Fantasy, much as the original 10 were, or most of them. I kind of don't want to dance around it too much. I think this is very good. This was originally on the Super Famicom, and it stayed there. So here's the fun number problem that Final Fantasy got into in North America. So the series starts in like 1987 in Japan. It takes them 3 years to release Final Fantasy in America. By the time Final Fantasy IV came out in Japan, there was like, you get into this localization, took a long time. No one wants to buy RPGs on the NES. This would look really whiz-bang. Final Fantasy IV turns into Final Fantasy II in America. Okay, snip-snap. That's confusing, but whatever. Final Fantasy V comes out about a year after Final Fantasy IV comes out as Final Fantasy II in North America. And it doesn't get localized. And I think it's because this was kind of like the absolute trough of like North American perceived interest in JRPGs. Like at the time, like Dragon Quest IV, I think, had been localized for the NES. Like you get stuff like Drakon. Basically, JRPGs just like aren't hitting, and they haven't hit, and like there's kind of a conviction that they won't. Meanwhile, CRPGs are doing just fine and plugging along as they always had been.
Damn straight.
So this doesn't get localized. Final Fantasy VI comes out in 1994, and it does get localized for reasons that I'm not 100% sure why they decided to do that, except that it just looked and played very well. And that gets turned into Final Fantasy III in America. So Final Fantasy III pre- and post-dates Final Fantasy V, depending on where you live, and plays very differently. Final Fantasy V is kind of the weird butt end of sort of the original like wave of Final Fantasies as you touch it and play it for a little bit here. It's kind of built around crystals in a way that feels very old school, but it fiddles with that space, which we'll talk about very quickly. It basically starts in a very Dragon Ball-esque what are we going to do to like raise the stakes of this immediately? Well, let's blow up the moon. Well, how about we just blow up all of the crystals?
Yeah, it pops off. There's a asteroid or a comet that crashes down. You find an unconscious amnesiac lying by the crystal and a lady, and your character butts Klauser.
Butts in certain versions, or Barts in the version that I played, and other versions that other people might be more familiar with.
I named him his canonical name, Butts.
One quick thing in terms of like just preemptively talking about the history of Final Fantasy. It's important to note that this game came out in Japan, and the audience that played it when it first came out. This game came out like a month after Dragon Quest V. And Dragon Quest V is like the most best-selling game that had released in the Super Famicom in Japan. It sold like 3 million copies, and it kept selling. And again, it was at the time one of the best-selling games on the Super Famicom. Final Fantasy V releases, and it does well enough to keep the franchise alive, but it sold significantly less, by the tune of like 1 million to 500,000 units less than Dragon Quest. So really, for Square Enix, after they had done Final Fantasy V, it kind of did lead them to when they started development of Final Fantasy VI, there was this sense of, we have to reinvent the wheel. We really need to do something completely and totally different. And we have to try something that really differentiates this franchise from Dragon Quest. Otherwise, we as a company will die. Yeah. And that's the reason why the transition, when you do play Final Fantasy V and you play a little bit of 6, which I have, it's like there is a noted and stark change in both tone, plot, gameplay. But it was kind of refreshing to come back to this game after playing 12-2 and, even dabbling in 6 in some of the later games.
Yeah. This game is fun first. It's very systems-oriented. The story is very entertaining, though not especially serious, I would say. And we haven't even met the villain yet. Like, there's a lot of great recurring gags. This is one of the most lighthearted JRPGs I've ever played. And it's just kind of a good time throughout. You get to play around with systems, you get to meet some fun characters, and the setups are, I think, pretty inventive. So,
I do want to just. I'm sorry. I just do want to say that that style of JRPG, by the time this game came out, even in Japan, had started to kind of fall out of favor. Like, Enix was investing somewhat into storytelling. You had the CRPGs that were becoming incredibly popular in Japan, like, Might and Magic. I think it was Ultima 6. Like, you had a lot of games that were coming out that you can still be fun, you can still be, like, systems-driven, but now there's this move towards, no, there has to be a little bit more of melodrama. And I think, again, for us, it was refreshing to see that. But also, this is kind of the end of an era in terms of the Final Fantasy franchise. Yeah. I mean, this is the last time we're going to see jobs like this be this much of a focal point outside of maybe Final Fantasy 10-2.
Yeah. 6 fiddles with it a little bit, but
and then also the idea that you can have this fun, lighthearted adventure. Except oddly enough, again 10-2. But I like it, but I also am totally understanding as to why this is kind of an aberration, and the company. It's a fun aberration, sure, absolutely. But I'm kind of happy this is not the only, like, Final Fantasy IX does not happen, Gino, just to kind of make this back. Those types of games, 9 and 10, don't happen if Square does not move away from these styles of RPGs.
Yeah. Yeah, this game, is a lot more like 3 and 1 in some ways, though it did gain a bunch of storytelling chops since then than it is to 7, 8, 9. It's much more of a systems game and much more of a Saturday morning cartoon, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. And I gotta say, I think this is some of the most fun I've had with a Final Fantasy game.
Yeah, it's a joy. So when you start out, you're Bart's Klausa, and a comet strikes the Earth, and you and your chocobo, Boko, go to figure out what happened. When you show up, you find a collapsed, unconscious man who doesn't remember who is anything except his name, which is Galoof. And then you find a lady who's there as well, who's also in trouble, and her name is Lena. Though Reina is what her name is in my version of the game, but I'm going to call her Lena from now on because that's the canonical name. And you have to rescue them from Goblin. Well, first you just find them, and then they say, "Hey, we're going to go try and save the Wind Crystal. Do you want to come with me to do it?" And Bart's is like, "Nah, I'm an adventurer. I'm going to go adventure." So you kind of split up with them. Then moments later, you find them in trouble, getting attacked by goblins. Bart saves them, and then the three decide that it's safer to travel together. You then go to a little cave, and you have to leave Boko behind because he can't travel through caves. And in this cave, you find pirates, which is great. It's just 5 minutes in, pirates.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I not to completely derail it, but that pace that wow, something new is happening, and I have to sort of new information is hitting me, and there's a change, and it's exciting, and it's dynamic. That basically just doesn't stop.
Yeah, the pace in this game is breakneck. You start all the things I've just described happen in the first 5 to 10 minutes of the game.
Yeah,
Meteor,
it is
party,
incredible.
Pirates. You then you try to steal the pirate ship, because you have no way of getting to the Wind Crystal without it. And you are caught by the pirate leader, Ferris. And he comes and says, "Hey, throw them in the brig." But when he throws you in the brig, some of the pirates spy Lena's necklace, which is a pendant that is passed down from the royal family because she is a princess. You find out she's a princess also. And Ferris notices that he has a similar pendant. And
dun, dun, dun!
Maybe there's something with Ferris and Lena, who's to say? So Ferris then sets you free and decides that he will accompany you to save the Wind Crystal. You can then take your boat to the first town if you want and equip stuff. And if you do, the pirates will get off of your ship and go drink grog, which is great. Or you can head straight to the tower with the Wind Crystal. Did y'all take the detour first, or just go
I
straight
took
to
the detour first, definitely, because I think I saw you do it on Steam, or not on stream, and I really liked the scene of like all these like Ferris is the first to go in, and then it's just this giant wave of pirates saying grog, 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 grog.
Yeah,
and then you
great.
go into the pub and you talk to the pub owner, and it's like, yeah, I have nothing to sell. They ate all of it. Because normally the pub owner has something to sell for you. I think it's like tonics or potions or some sort of like thing like that. But he's got nothing and it's just a little bit of like world building and storytelling. Like even if none of these pirates are named characters, they feel like it feels
They're a jolly
wholesome.
band.
Yeah.
They're a jolly band. They respect Ferris. Also, something worth noting, like the amount, I was kind of flabbergasted. I kind of forgot that this era, the Super Nintendo, I think we kind of overlooked that the attempts at like cutscenes, while they're usually in-game cutscenes, the idea of like using CG or full motion video isn't until the PS2 era, really. But the use of cutscenes in here are kind of revolutionary, and I like the playing around with like the Mode 7 perspective. Like when a meteor drops, you kind of follow it in this first-person perspective.
Yeah. They use Mode 7 really well in this game.
Yeah, they really do, and it does lend like it feels like a larger world. That's because it is, but these cutscenes, like in the beginning where like that first meteor crashes, there's this like very tightly cut juxtapositioning with all of the characters in their different places, in their different locations, and it does a really good job. I really enjoy that part of the game.
Yep.
Where I think that I slightly disagree with the both of you is that you talk about how this game has a lot of pacing, but the one thing that I feel like I can ding, and it's just a small nitpick, and I feel like, again, overall, I agree. I really like this game. This game really does have a lot of interstitial moments that just stop. They stops everything. Like you get to that point where the ship can't move, and it just you're fighting. What is it? Shiva?
Zombies. Lots of zombies.
Yeah, it's Shivas and zombies. There's a lot of moments where just it stops, and it's very combat and mechanically heavy.
There are some dungeons. And
there's some dungeons, but I almost wish that there had been more like character moments, because the character moments that are here are very good. But once a character is done with their little kind of moment, there can be a big delay between that and the next story moment.
Yeah, because this is much more of a plot game than an ensemble cast game. Most Final Fantasy games are generally a bunch of pretty interesting characters interacting and just having their character beats over and over again. And you generally love the games. They rise and fall with the cast. And the plot tends to be out there, but that's not necessarily like some of the plots are interesting, but for the most part, I find that my enjoyment comes from these larger casts and their interesting interactions. This game is the opposite. It is kind of a Saturday morning cartoon. We're going to have a bunch of ridiculous things happen over and over and over again. We're not going to take it very seriously, but it's going to be fun. And these characters are largely just going to be their archetypes. They're not going to grow very much. They're just going to react the same way to everything, and we're just going to play them against these increasingly ridiculous situations, which in some ways feels like a much more Japanese way of storytelling, having these characters that are largely just their archetypes, and then the thing that makes the game interesting is playing them against increasingly ridiculous scenarios.
Sure. Well, it reminds me of, like, again, kind of broad Japanese pop culture archetypes, but then, like, the way things wind up getting framed, 6, I think, is sort of, like, the pinnacle of this, but it happens in 5 as well, is very, like Jinju, like a Beijing opera style stage direction, where sprites, like, I don't want to jump too far ahead, but there'll be scenes where, like, a sprite will walk across the screen very slowly, pause, head will tilt down. It conveys, like, all these very specific feelings, and then the music will kick in, sort of in sync with it, and explains all of it. Like, does a lot with like 5 tools basically in the span of about 10 seconds. Like every time it happens, I think of like Final Fantasy 13 cutscenes.
Yeah,
and it's like you have all the tools and all the money in the universe, and you convey so much less.
There's
than like a
Gino
sprite
said,
walking
emotional.
across the screen. Yeah. Like so. The economy of emotion and animation in this game leads to, I think, some surprisingly poignant moments.
Yeah, and we'll get
even
to one
given
soon.
the kind of pastiche of everything that's happening in this game.
I gotta say, like, even in looking at the Super NES version, the SNES version of this game, like, they get a lot out of the limited animations. Even the version that, which we should probably talk about next, but even the versions that Jeff and I are playing, like, the limited amount of animation, they get a lot out of very little. In terms of just understanding the characters, their emotions, like what the story is trying to do.
Yeah, and the sound library. Like, they make the most out of the SNES sound effects.
So, let's talk about the different versions that we're all playing.
I'm playing the PS1 version, the PS1 remaster.
Okay. So, that's kind of worth talking about in itself, isn't it?
Yeah, so my version, the big innovation of that one is it has a run button. In earlier versions of the game, there are some characters that you need to get the thief's run ability in order to even run. In my version, you can run if you like the thief ability just makes you run 4 times as fast instead of 2 times as fast. And then the other big innovation is the translation. I think this was the first translation of this game, so it is into English. So it is spotty. In this,
it is. Famously spotty.
It is incredible. Should I say incredible? It's the greatest. Galoof in pretty much every re-release after this version is played up as kind of an older, kind of more reserved gentleman. In this version, he's a lech. He's kind of he's Master Roshi. He's kind of an old perv. In this version, there's a bunch of enemies that have just incredible names, like Soccer. It's supposed to be Sucker because it's an octopus, or it's a squid, but its name is Soccer. There's a lot of just great names all throughout this game.
The one that kills me is Wyvern for Wyvern, or like a
Wyvern. Yeah,
it's literally Y space burn.
There's a lot of great names. I would say play the PS1 version. It's got all the glitches from the SNES version too, so it's one of the better ones for speedrunning or doing any sort of trick run. But it has an English translation, is slightly faster, and has what is the term? It has a memo file. It has a quick save feature, so you can save anywhere, which is
also has
huge.
Load times, which is great.
They're not like huge load time, not terrible.
They're not horrible. I don't care for them. The first fan translation I can find online for Final Fantasy V, the pirated ROM, is from it's on my birthday, 17 October 1998. Whereas
let me tell you about
anthology...
those 90s era fan translations, Jeff. Because
they're good stuff. And then you look at stuff from Working Design, the actual company that did them professionally, and it's like, hey, I love Bill Clinton jokes. So that actually predates Final Fantasy Anthology, the actual release of it, by about a year. It was like September 30th, 1999. So, and I think there was a lot of dork awareness, even at that time, that Final Fantasy V was like good and deserved to be translated, and there was a concerted effort to make that available to other dorks who were pirating stuff already.
We need more dork awareness.
Yeah, dorks, hey, we out here living life. But yeah, so Final Fantasy V, first available in North America on the PlayStation with a celebrated bad translation. I am playing the next time it was really widely available in the West, in the Occident, which is the GBA version. I feel like that was a 2005 game.
I own that version as well, and it is quite good.
It is quite good. Fun thing about it is you play it on a Game Boy Advance, which I have an SP. I'm using a headphone adapter I've gone through 3 of those in the last year, and every one of them sucks. And the GBA is known for its really good sound. Like, generally, it's like noisy, terrible, fuzzy, bad, like kind of broken SNES sound. But when you've got like a headphone adapter that just randomly cuts out whole channels of audio occasionally, it's a real treat. So I'm actively thinking about buying one of those analog Game Boy things.
Join the dark side, Jeff.
I already have their Sega, so
join the dark side.
It is fantastic. What version are you playing, ZombiePie?
I am playing the Android iOS Steam port, which preserves the GBA translation but adds in new art, pixel work, sprite work, and a new menu system. Now, some, such as Gino, will have you believe that I am playing the worst possible version of Final Fantasy V, and that is not correct. From what I hear, the new 3DS Virtual Console version is really bad. But, all right, I'm going to preface this by saying a couple things. One, I personally like the new art because, and plug your ears, Jeff, I really don't like Yoshitaka Amano's art style.
Go to
I
hell.
think it's a bunch of wispy bullshit, and it actually is kind of... It's a bunch of wispy bullshit, and it doesn't actually help lend itself with a lighthearted adventure like this.
Okay, even if I accept, like, I can accept that you don't like a thing. That's fine. Like, no problem with that. I think the mobile ports of these games look like garbage.
I completely and totally disagree. I think that some of the sprite work looks bad, especially when it's a circular object. They tried to stretch and cut off the corners to square-based JPEGs and, PNGs, and they didn't actually fit it to fit a circular object. But I actually like the look of it. I think some of the character work was really good. I think the character portraits are way better. I really like the character portraits. I mean, someone like Mid actually looks like a child in this game, and it's actually kind of touching, and I love it. And I also think that
portraits in this game, in my version.
I think that the character portraits in this game are great. I really appreciate it. And plus, and Jeff is probably going to talk about it, they've changed the autosave feature in this version of the game to where it's not completely terrible, even though it's still completely terrible. And I got to say, having the game automatically save where you were before the battle start that killed you has been a godsend. Even if it's in the middle of a dungeon, the game automatically has a quick save where it saves your progress before the battle. So even when you die, you get a TPK, a total party kill. It immediately, you can just hit resume, and it takes you back to where you were, even if your hard save file is like hours away. And that has
I think
been
that's
great.
Actually fine.
And also, it has the PlayStation 1 music, so it merges the PlayStation 1 music with the GBA translation. Which
the PS1 music should just be the SNES stuff too.
Yeah. So I can actually talk about the translation side of things as someone who was once a participant in the anime fan subbing community. The best way to characterize Final Fantasy V's translation from PlayStation, not the PlayStation 1 because it's just weird, but from the GBA forward, the current version of Final Fantasy V, the best way to call it, like in terms of what area of thought it came from, is Woolseyism.
Yeah.
It's one of the greatest examples of Woolseyism.
What is Woolseyism?
Now, Woolseyism, Ted Woolsey, who is probably the most important person in Final Fantasy history that almost nobody in the modern era knows about. So Ted Woolsey was the primary translator for Squaresoft in the Super Nintendo era. He was completely in charge of... He was the translator...
put-upon man. Holy shit.
He is...
productive.
He translated everything that Squaresoft made that came into the United States and the West from 1991 to 1996.
Yes.
Now,
everything.
This man was so good at his job that basically Square had one person in charge of translation, and that was him. So if you like Final Fantasy 4 and 6 primarily, that was him. That, Kefka saying son of a submariner, that was his idea. Yeah. And what it kind of speaks to is that Woolsey and Woolseyism is polarizing within the fan subbing community, as well as, the anime and JRPG community. Because on one hand, you have a lot of people who argue that he's iron-fisted and he always thought, he thought less of the American audience in that he assumed that they wouldn't get Japanese culture. And so his belief was, instead of trying to translate this literally, let's take it out and change it with different stuff. To the other hand, especially in the era that Ted Woolsey was working with the limited resources that he was working with, he was literally transcribing entire lines of dialogue onto handwritten notes before he programmed them into the game. He's a creative artisan that basically is the reason why JRPGs are as popular as they are, because especially his work with Final Fantasy VI, I mean, this entire genre would not exist had it not been for his enduring legacy. But at the same time, he made some creative choices, and that's exactly what the Final Fantasy V translation does, is it does take a lot of creative choices and a lot of creative liberties because it refuses to translate the characters literally. So in our version, Jeff and my versions of this game, a lot of the characters are a lot more free form, they're more fun, there's jokes without referential humor, I would say. Like the classic
references in my version either.
Yeah, I mean, there's at least one I'll get to eventually, but
I know which one you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, relative to again working designs sort of stuff from the same period, which was like 100% reference, just miserable. This is actually pretty fun to read.
Yes, it's a lot of fun to read.
Cringe.
And the classic example of Ted Woolsey's approach to translation is, and just to remind people that like Nintendo of America was super strict, like almost draconian in a lot of ways. So the scene where Kefka says "son of a submariner," which is what a lot of people say is both the best and the worst example of Ted Woolsey's approach to translation. In the Japanese version, the literal translation is "son of a bitch." He says that in the Japanese version. But two reasons that he didn't do that. One, he knew that Nintendo of America would not allow it. And then two, like exactly what the Japanese is it would be like balls. Like, the term for balls means damn it. And he couldn't do that. And so he changed it to son of a submariner. And how about I look at my notes for the character of Kefka? Oh, he's a clown. So what if I add in a bunch of, malapropisms and transliterations to where that's now his character arc, is that he says weird things that are kind of iconic. But in the original version of the game, he's just an evil dude. Yeah. He's not super fun. He's not as free-form or free-loving as the character that he is. But guess what? His translation works, and now it is canon, and they've actually recontextualized Kefka to meet Woolsey's translation even in Japan.
Dope. Very cool.
It's basically the pragmatic...
But he did not touch this game, correct?
No, he did not touch this game because, again, it did not come into the United States. But his
spirit lives on, basically.
His spirit lives on, and like Jeff and I have said, he's probably the most important person in Square's history that most people don't know about. Like, he is the reason why Final Fantasy VI is widely considered one of the greatest games, because by doing all of that translation, again, by literal handwritten notes, the franchise would not be where it is today, at least in the West.
Shit. Yeah. Yeah, Ted Woolsey, incredibly important, if not directly to Final Fantasy V at the time, just to translators and dorks on romhacking.net going forward. Yeah. If nothing else, just to debate about.
Like, eviscerated the fan subbing community as a result, because everyone in the fan subbing community were diehard. You translate this shit literally. Yeah. You translate it in spirit, and if you're not the ones that's willing to look up, like, here's an example. Gino, when you were playing the Persona 5 game, I think it was either you or Billy pointed out that really shitty part of the game where you have to play shogi. And if you don't know what shogi is, that entire scene sucks. It sucks so much because you don't
play
know what
shogi in that game for an extended amount of time.
Yeah. If you don't know how the rules work or how that game works, that entire scene sucks. Woolsey would have said, what if I made this a club to where a character actually spends some line of dialogue teaching how to play the game, and it's like this club trying to bring back a dead board game. Like, because if I translate it literally, this sucks. But if I make it kind of like completely recontextualize, it actually works.
Or let's say we like genuine, this wouldn't happen anymore because I think there is some dork awareness of shogi. But let's say 15 years ago, the localization office would go back and say, hey, really cool, the scene's great, this needs to be chess. You need to put chess in here.
Yep.
Like, that's the only way this works.
What if it's checkers? Because we're
What
not
if it's
teaching anyone anything.
Sure, let's go even lower. But something like that, yeah, it is the... I've studied a lot of languages at a collegiate level and then kind of recreationally, and yeah, the fun debate between literalists and preserving the actual meaning of the thing.
Because I'm sorry, I love
Literalists
these games, I love this franchise, but I'm literally not gonna like pause my game, look up on Wikipedia.
Literally.
Like, this was back what you had to do. You had to have History Britannica or a reference manual as you played these games, because it's like, what am I even looking at? Who's this god? Oh my god. And Woolsey, again, his approach was about, most audiences can't do that. If we want this genre to go mainstream, we have to take in some effort to, like, either completely change the language or the spirit, keep the spirit of the game, but change it to where it works with the American audience.
Last thought on this, and then we need to talk about the
further.
actual game.
Yes, but like, I guess the Square solution of this ultimately is like, let's just start making our own ridiculous shit up and start using words like "l'Cie," because then no one will know what we're talking about anyway.
Great move. So this game was not touched by Woolsey in any way, at least that we know of. And the versions we've all played, they are all varying levels of the same. There's no major change in the fundamentals of Final Fantasy V between the
not the spirit, but I would say that Jeff and our version of the game is even more lighthearted than yours, judging based off of what I've seen on your stream. Like, there's a lot, not necessarily more dialogue, but the dialogue has been rewritten to where it's even more lighthearted and fun and humor based.
Sure, and I don't think there's a major difference in, like, the difficulty or the HP. It's not like with Final Fantasy 2 where if you're playing the original version, you're just hurting yourself for no reason. So in the first town, I feel like there's just one thing to call. There's a few things. One, there's a learner's lodge, or basically an area where there's a bunch of NPCs who will teach you the game and teach you all the mechanics, which is cool. There's also in the pub a piano, and to get to the piano in the first town, you have to sit down in a chair, and there are 3 ladies dancing on the stage that are blocking your way to the piano. And if you sit in the chair, they will give Bartz a lap dance, and then you can get to the piano, and it's important you get to the piano. Did y'all play the piano?
I played a piano in a later town.
But I've played later ones for sure. I need to go
didn't,
back.
I didn't get that one, but I definitely was like, I wonder if this piano is interactable. Oh, hey, yes, it is. So I did one in I think Karnak. I did the one in Karnak, and it's like, oh, hey.
And Bart's
pretty kind of weird that's probably one of maybe 2 side quests. There aren't a lot of side quests in this game, other than maybe a couple of one-off conversations you can have with optional characters that lead a little bit more wholeness to the world, but not a lot of side quests? Maybe I missed something, or
there are some later on. There are some towards the end of the game, but there's not very many early. And it's worth saying the pianos are relevant. You should learn to play the piano. You get a thing if you learn how to play the piano. So that's the main first town. You then go to the tower with the wind crystal. Fight your way to the top. It's not very difficult. You fight a giant bird at the top, and then after you defeat it, you find that you are too late. The wind crystal is damaged and ruptures immediately upon you entering the crystal chamber.
Sure. Now, it should be noted, when you pause this game at this point, and you look at each one of your characters, it just says freelancer next to it. You're like, sure, yeah, they're just whatever, like, who cares? Like, why is it telling me this? Lo and behold, the crystal breaks.
You get jobs.
And it turns into jobs.
It turns out
trickle-down crystal.
Each of the crystals... Yes, the trickle-down crystal. Each of the crystals contains the soul of a warrior from the past, and it imbues your characters with the ability to perform menial tasks for a salary. The first crystal shatters into 6 collectible pieces, which give you access to Knight, Thief, Monk, White mage, black mage, and blue mage. So 5 of these jobs are the original jobs from Final Fantasy I, and then blue mage is kind of the wild card in place of red mage, which you get later on. But the big thing here is that you can assign any job to any character. You can swap them. The longer your character is equipped with a job, at the end of every battle, they will get AP or ability points, which will unlock different active and passive abilities according to what job they have equipped. So something like, say, for example, the thief, you will just get the ability to steal as long as you're a thief. It will also change what weapons and armor you can equip. If you're a thief, you can only equip daggers, and I don't think you can equip shields, and then you can only equip light armor, and it'll also impact your stats as well. And you'll have steal as your active ability, and then you'll have a passive slot that you can fill with abilities from other jobs, or if you level up Thief, you'll start getting passive abilities that you can equip. For example, I think the first one with Thief is Sprint, which allows your character to move 4 times as fast. But as you level up each of these jobs, you can kind of find ways to mix and match their abilities. So, like, Knights get to equip heavy armor and shields and swords, so they are the best, one of the best damage dealers in the early game. But they can also use a sword two-handed if you don't equip a shield, and that will cause them to deal double damage. And you can get the ability to two-hand if you stay stay as a knight for long enough. You can get the ability to equip heavy armor, and so you can kind of get some hybridization between the jobs, and that's kind of the center of the gameplay here. But it's worth mentioning, I am playing this game differently than both of you.
Yeah,
all right.
Tell us about it.
I am participating in a 4-job fiesta. Now, what is a 4-job fiesta, you may ask? Well,
yes.
What is a 4-job fiesta?
I only get 4 jobs. 1 job per crystal. This is a regular 4-job fiesta. Each crystal, there are 4 crystals total: wind, water, fire, and earth, and they will each shatter. Spoilers. I don't think they're going to all make it.
Oh, no.
No.
Gino, how could you?
And each of them will give a burst of jobs, and for a 4-job fiesta, I will be assigned at random 1 job from each crystal, and then those are the only ones I get to use. All the other ones are verboten. However, I can swap who is equipped with what job, so I can hybridize if I want to, and I also have to make sure that at least 1 character is equipped with each job. So up until the 4th crystal, I can have some overlap, but once I get to the 4th crystal, it's 1 of each at all times. So if I get a Geomancer, one of my people is going to be a fucking Geomancer. If I get some shit job, if I get Berserker, one of my characters is going to be a Berserker.
Yeah, that one seems particularly fun.
That one's fucked.
Yeah.
I really have not enjoyed my time with the Geomancer. I tried, but it's not been fun.
I've beaten the game with a Geomancer. It's tough in a 4-job fiesta.
I'm leveling one right now, but we'll get into it.
But my so far, I got the Blue Mage at the very first job, which is great because it lets me execute death by math.
Yeah.
Which is a great way to win in this game in the long term. It's a very broken tactic, and I can explain it as we go a little bit further and talk about some of these jobs. And then for the 2nd crystal, I have It's called Sorcerer in my version of the game, but it's Mystic Knight in yours.
Yeah.
So the magical knights
All right.
to enchant their blades and
I
spells.
have found a 4-job fiesta randomizer, and now I'm going to click it. Should I allow? There's a button here that says allow Berserker, allow Mime. Do you want me to click this?
I have not allowed either of them. Why are you going to try and do it for?
No, I just want to see what would happen if I actually did the thing that Gino told me.
Yeah, I would not allow Berserker. Like, you can beat the game with it, but it just makes everything.
There's
so
another
much
button here
harder.
that says allow advanced jobs. Do you want me to click that?
No, that's only for the GBA.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hi.
But I can do that. All right, so I'm going to randomize win. I got Black Mage.
That's a good one.
Okay, I'm going to hit
Everything
the,
but Thief is fine.
Okay, I'm going to hit Water. I got Red Mage.
That one's fine also, but not as good because you already have Black Mage.
Okay, I'm going to hit randomize on Fire. I got Bard, son of a bitch.
Bard's not terrible, not amazing, but you
All
can
right,
get
I'm going
by
to hit
with
the
Bard.
Earth Crystal spoilers, right? I have to dart my eyes away, okay? I got Dragoon.
That one's shit.
So I've got Black Mage, Red Mage, Bard, and Dragoon. Gino, how long would it take me to, like, give up on life itself if I had to play this?
You don't get to cheat at all with that. You have to just beat the game pretty much straightforward. Bard is the only one of those jobs that lets you cheat even a little bit. So I would say that'd be... I guess Black Mage lets you cheat on some stuff because you get some elemental spells that can one-hit kill some things. That's one of the cool things about 4-Job Fiestas is there are a number of ways to approach every encounter in this game, and they are all equally viable. So you can find weird ways to cheese out bosses that you might not think of at first.
All right, I'm going to do this for
Jeff.
Jeff.
You'd probably be okay. It's
Jeff,
not amazing. I'd say you'd quit
do whatever
after 10
you
hours.
say is like your lucky thing. Put on your lucky underpants, put on your lucky socks. I'm going to do one for you, okay?
I'm holding my cat.
Okay, pet that cat, tell it you love it.
Egg,
Okay.
I love you very much, little egg.
Okay, so for Jeff, if he were to do this, I have Monk for Wind. That's solid.
That's solid to
Could
get
be
you
worse.
through the second dungeon, and then it's shit.
Okay, Randomize Water. He's getting Mystic Knight.
That's fine.
Solid.
You can one-hit kill some things.
All right,
the lack of
Fire
redundancy
Crystal for
with
Jeff
Monk
would
sucks.
be Ninja.
That's dope.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
It's like a clutch. I'm rolling a ninja right now.
All right, and now for his Earth Crystal, he got Samurai.
You can do some stuff with Samurai. You can throw money at your enemies and one-hit kill them towards the end of the game.
Sounds like Jeff
So
got
that's
the longer end of the stick, as they say.
Yeah, slightly.
Good job,
Both
Big.
of those are totally fine, though.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no, we're not
that's
going to do
just-
that because...
Like, it's like they accounted for all of this. Like, that's the crazy thing about this game so far, is balancing this probably was a nightmare.
Oh, yeah.
They did it.
But they pulled it off.
I
Like-
think that's why the game is so not invested in its story. I can only imagine, especially on the SNES, that programming these jobs was the lion's share of this game's development, and it took forever to balance them, took forever to figure out what's the proper pacing, like what's the right amount of AP. So I think that's part of the reason why I feel hesitant to nitpick the story, because I feel like the work that they did do is so respectable and probably was just so time-consuming that I respect it.
It's impressive.
But I
so
will
that crystal
say,
breaks.
Yeah, the crystal breaks. I got Blue Mage. Should I explain Death by Math now?
We may as
let's-
well. 'Cause let's talk about Blue Mage.
Yeah.
So
I would
it's
like maybe a little refresher course about some of these jobs, because as someone who's
Yeah.
playing this game blind, which again, I
Oh.
know both of you said not to play this game blind,
You
but
shouldn't.
I respect you. I'm not
Yes.
doing it, but I respect you doing it.
I'll go over each of the jobs when we get to the crystal. How's
Sure.
about that? So
Absolutely.
for this Knight, it's straightforward. It's your damage dealer class. It gets to wear heavy armor. Just whack things till they die. It's very good in the early game, and it
It
scales
unlocks
pretty
the
well.
ability to wear armor on different classes. That's like its
Yeah.
main. It unlocks like weapons and armor that you could stick on other things.
You can also protect enemies that are low on health, allies that are low on health, and you can guard, which will negate physical damage until your next turn, which is pretty good as well. Then we've got Thief, which is pretty much just a supplemental job for getting way too many items and way too much money. It sucks in combat. It doesn't have as long as you're using a guide or something, it has a passive ability that lets you see traps, and that's useful if you're not using a guide. But if you are using a guide, then you can just where the holes in the floor and where
Yeah,
the bad traps
it's
are.
a passive to see like hidden passageways. I think the only real good thing that a thief will do is you'll get mug eventually, which is like does a thief's damage, which is okay, but then also steals at the same time.
I have found having one person with the dash passive ability has been just a lifesaver.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah,
great.
that helps.
It's a quality of life job. Like, it lets
Sure.
you just run super fast. So it's not, as someone who's trying to like get through the game with only 4 jobs, I would be fucking miserable if I got Thief. But as something that you can just have in the passive slot, great. And it also, in the SNES and PS1 versions, allows you to do some item duping tricks with Thief and Ninja. Then Monk, it's kind of like Knight. It's another damage-dealing class, although monks get to wear much worse or no armor, and they basically fight barehanded, so they get to save on swords. And because monks are barehanded, barehand strikes in this game hit twice, one for each hand. So you get double the chances at critting, which is nice. And monks crit pretty frequently.
I've not used Monk at all. Is it as good as my beloved Final Fantasy I Monk?
No, not at all.
Better, I think.
Well, I would say that one of my favorite things is to have all of my characters play the monk to where they get the focus ability, and in certain boss battles, having the focus ability, which is basically the critical hit ability in the Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic and Baldur's Gate series. Basically, you do one attack with the same accuracy or hit chance, but twice as much damage, and it takes a little bit longer to do.
It costs you 2 turns, but you hit for double damage, which means that if you crit, you do quad damage.
Yes.
Which is pretty great.
And so I have a lot of people who have level 1 monk just for that ability in case I realize it's time for a boss. So
yeah. And you get kick, which just hits all your opponent's characters. That
very flashy animation. I love the animation for kick.
And chakra, which just heals your character, which is a cool thing for your damage dealing class to get. Black Mage is your normal elemental damage. It, weak power, weak armor, can only equip staves and daggers, but they just deal elemental damage. But it's worth mentioning that in this game, all sorts of status effects actually impact enemies and bosses. Mm-hmm. So things like poison, silence, death, even stone, all of these abilities are Black Mage abilities, and they can just one-hit kill certain bosses.
Which is a lot of fun,
trivial.
Certainly, and this is why Gino's going to spend time talking about Death by Math, but it's also wildly imbalanced and kind of broken.
Yes.
Which is great.
If you're capable of doing all of it, it's wildly imbalanced and broken. If you're limited to only 4 ways of interacting with the game, I like having some things that are just like, this boss is easy, I don't have to worry about it. But all the bosses tend to take different strategies. It's not the same single strategy that you're going to do all the time, except to a certain degree Death by Math. But even that has its limits. And another thing worth mentioning for those of you who haven't played this game very much, you can throw certain items at the enemy. So staves, like the Ice Staff, Fire Staff, or I guess, is it Fire Rod, Ice Rod, and Lightning Rod? You can, if you're equipped with that, you can go into your inventory and double-click on it, and instead of equipping, as long as it's in your hand, you will throw it at the enemy, and that will cast Blizzara or Thundara or Fyara on the enemy before you have access to those spells. So it's a good way to kill certain enemies very early on in the game. And you can buy those rods in Karnak. White Mage, it's your normal healer class. You get buffs, debuffs. Actually, I think it's just buffs, all sorts of buffs and healing. Healing status effects. It's very easy to beat the game as long as you have access to it, and if you're playing the game straight up, it makes sense to have some levels in White Mage. And then Blue Mage this is the first Final Fantasy game with a Blue Mage in it. And what Blue Mages do is they learn attacks from enemies. So the Blue Mage will let you learn certain enemy skills and then throw it back at them. The very first one you'll get access to is the Goblin Punch, which you can learn from goblins, and that is a 0 MP attack that works from the front row or the back row. There's rows in this game. You deal more damage if you're in the front, take less damage if you're in the back. And it basically deals, I think, like 3 times whatever your base attack is, and it does that damage all the time. Just period. So it lets you deal a pretty decent amount of damage from the back row, which is useful. But there are certain combinations of abilities that are very broken for Blue Mage because Blue Mages get to do some weird, wild stuff. Like level 5 Death, for example, is an ability. There's a lot of level X something spells in this game. Level 5 Death, I think level 3 Holy, level 2 Old. I forget what the level 4 magic is. If someone could look that up.
It's level 4 Gravitas, or Gravity.
Gravity?
Gravitas.
Hey, Malpropisms is my jam.
Fair enough.
And then there's, I believe, Dark Shock. Is that the other one? Okay, so what Death by Math is that there's an ability called Dark Shock, which just halves your opponent's level. And level 5 death will kill any enemy if its level is a multiple of 5. And it does not care if it's a boss. Doesn't care. It will just instantly kill whatever it is. So what you do is with Dark Shock, you can divide your opponent's level in half, which then, because of level 2 old and the way that underflows work in this game, if you divide an odd number using Dark Shock, it will become an even number, because dividing an odd number by 2 leaves a remainder, and it just gets removed. And then that will make the opponent's level even, and then you can hit them with level 2 old because it, again, ignores your opponent's resistances. And then once you hit them with level 2 old, that will cause their level to slowly decrease, because that's what the old status effect does. And it decreases at a steady rate. So you can just count a few seconds, and then once it's a multiple of 5, just cast level 5 death and kill them. So there's a lot of level manipulation you can do. Final Fantasy V feels like when you get Tonberry in Final Fantasy VIII, and you're just playing with a debug menu.
Yeah.
But all the time. So that's the Blue Mage. Blue Mage is really cool. And you get to kind of
I would say
items and equipment.
This kind of gets into some of the nitpicks that we were talking about on Discord, which you should join if you are not there yet.
Sure. Patreon,
Discord, donate now, but don't
Thank
donate
you. I didn't even
money.
tell you to do that.
Yes, we're trying to help. And I think we talked about this before, but a couple of things that annoyed me, and feel free to echo. I feel like that one passive ability, the ability slot, as much as I liked it, which is really a creative way to, like, I want to be a knight, but I also want to be able to cast white magic, so I can do that. And basically I can turn my knight into a paladin.
Yeah.
The problem is that there's only one ability slot that you ever have, unless you use Freelancer. I know Gino's going to say that, but Freelancer doesn't give you APB. You're not leveling anything up, so it kind of feels like a waste until you get to the late game.
Yeah, Freelancer is kind of your final job because it lets you equip all items and equip 2 passives or active abilities.
But for the rest of the game, if you're not using your APB to get more stuff, it's kind of a waste of a class for a long portion of the game until you get to the very end where using everything is kind of clutch.
I've been hot swapping into Freelancer a couple times already.
There have been a couple of battles where having a Freelancer with 2 passive abilities has been – I've done that, but again –
situational.
It's very situational. The other thing that it's weird to see the math like after a battle, and it's like my characters are leveling up and also my jobs are leveling up, and it's a lot of numbers, and the game is not great about which numbers are going to what or what translates into this, what translates into that, and that is compounded by the fact that I know what Gino is going to say, that you really don't have a clear idea what the next ability you're going to get out of each of these jobs. You just have a sense of like, oh, you've got 15 out of 30 AP points for your knight. When you finally get it, you find out it's guard. What does that mean? You kind of have to test it out or read the little bio thing there. Well, I have a thief. It's already got the one ability that I wanted, which is dash. Now it's leveling up 50. What is that? Oh, it's steal. Yeah. That's kind of super situational because that's not great. And it's like some of them are pretty easy to determine, like the white mage and the black mage. Basically, you can now use a new level, the next level of magic. But others, such as, there are some jobs that are just super confusing and obtuse about what you get. For example, the ninja. It's like, oh, I got smoke. What does that mean? I don't know.
Raises your evasion.
Cool. I've got image.
Oh, no, it lets you escape.
See, exactly, Gino. It's like I didn't know I was getting that, and now that I have it, I kind of wish I had put those points into something different.
Well, it's a shame the internet doesn't exist.
Sure. So, I don't like to short this. I think there's kind of I have 2 thoughts on this. One, I think this just clearly indicates that this was a game that was developed in Japan, the country that gave us the Tower of Druaga.
Yes.
And then spent the next 2 years literally leaving journals next to Tower of Druaga cabinets where people would leave notes for each other on how to get through the game. Like, sort of broad societal problem solving in video games in that country was already, like, a decade old nearly at the time this came out. So, and, as we've noted, this was a well-received and widely popular game. So hints and tips were traded around very quickly around this, and I imagine they expected that, I don't know, they'll figure it out. Which
it also came with a guidebook.
It also came with a guidebook, so there you go. So that part, the other part, I don't disagree. That's it's kind of, I'm pouring in a lot of points in this, and it takes forever. I feel like a lot of my complaints with this game amount to I wish it wouldn't make me want to play it so much.
Yeah.
And I feel like you could get around it by basically either having the cost of everything or doubling the AP output of everything.
Yeah.
And just being let's just play this in fast mode. Otherwise, you would cut down. I realize people enjoy grinding, and there's not a ton of it in here already, but what if there was less?
But
or what if, in
you
Final
don't actually
Fantasy...
need any of this.
You really don't. Yeah, that's the other thing. Is it's all kind of subjective. Yeah. This is a Billy Rothert problem. Which I love you, Billy. But
I mean, just to go back to
now that I know there's a blue mage I can get every spell for, I'm gonna get all of them. I'm not gonna actually get all of them, but I'm gonna get all of them that look good, that look fun, because I want to have the fun. I want to do the 2-handed 4-hit thing.
You need 3. You need 3 abilities, and then after that you're good.
Yeah,
but even then, Gino, I feel like some of the games we've already talked about all have, even the early, mid, and late game, efficient ways to grind, and Final Fantasy V doesn't have that. And there's no real kind of more frustrating of... I get it. There's one down the road, but let's look back to Final Fantasy VIII and IX. There's an easy way to level up your character's abilities within, the first act of the game of either of those games. And there's even versions of that, the Power Peninsula in Final Fantasy I, which is totally unintentional, but it's there and it's really cool. The other thing that Jeff is kind of talking about is that the APB, at the very least, and I noticed this, having a battle against 5 enemies, like a trash mob, and only getting 1 APB point is weird. It happens. And I wish that,
It happens quite a lot.
At the very least, give me 1 point per enemy. I don't understand. Yeah, I just feel like the APB, and then sometimes bosses give you 5 or 7, a really weird, prime number. And it's man. Yeah. I don't hate it. It's just a nitpick. It's just something that kind of bothers me.
That's fine. And... this game has a lot of little things like that you could hark back on because it's an older design, but I think for the most part they nail a lot of these things on their first try, which is pretty impressive in a game that's so ambitious. So
we break the first crystal.
We break the first crystal. This causes all wind to stop in the entire world.
You break it, you buy it.
Yeah.
Which is a problem because you've got a sailboat, or so it would appear. But it turns out that your boat is not actually a sailboat. The sails are just for show. It's being pulled by a sea monster named Slydra.
One of my favorite cars in the Final Fantasy TCG.
Yes. And Slydra is a Hydra. It's named Hydra in my version of the game instead of Slydra. But it pulls this boat, and that allows your ship to still function without wind. You need to go to the first town to get a key to go through a dam that is basically stopping your progress. An old guy who's family friends with Lena eventually gives you the key, and he asks you to look after Lena on your journey. And you find out that Bartz is an orphan as well. And then you end up going through the dam. There's a whirlpool in this... I guess it's a canal, not a dam. There's a whirlpool in the canal, and it pulls in your ship, and Slydra sacrifices herself to push you out of the whirlpool, but your ship ends up drifting because there's no wind. So it just drifts until eventually it crashes in a ship graveyard. And then in the ship graveyard... you have to fight through a bunch of zombies and stuff. And I think that the ship graveyard is one of the best level designs as a tutorial level possible.
Oh, it's fantastic. Yeah.
Every single job that you could possibly get has a cool way to get through the ship graveyard. all of the enemies are zombies, so your white mages can deal damage to them with healing magic. All of them are vulnerable to, I believe, fire magic, so your black mages do extra damage. Your knights and your monks will just one-shot most things pretty early on. The enemies give a bunch of experience in AP as well. And even the blue mage doesn't have anything to learn, but blue mages can just kind of kill most of these enemies pretty easily because they've got decent weapons. And even thieves, the enemies drop dirks, so you can get a better dagger for your thief just by being there. So it's one of the best designs. Like, there's something for every job, and it really teaches you about the job system. At the end, you need to fight a siren, and the siren puts a curse on all of your party members except for Galoof, because it causes your party members to see members from their past and family members, and they are entranced, and are put to sleep. But Galoof, because he's amnesiac, can't remember the person who the siren creates to try and enchant him. So he snaps everyone else out of it.
I was going to say, there are a couple of things with the characters that are worth mentioning at this point. The first thing is Galoof is an amnesiac, but occasionally he'll meet people that know a little bit about his past, and it's like, oh, do you know who I am? No, not really. Oh, shit. The other thing is, and this leads to probably one of my least favorite moments in the game so far, is the reveal of Ferris.
In the ship graveyard, Ferris gets wet. All the characters get wet because they need to go under some water. And Lena goes to change out of her wet clothes to dry off, and she goes off into a private room because she's a lady. And then Galoof and Bartz are like, hey, take your clothes off. We'll dry them over here. Who cares? We're all guys here. And Ferris is like, I'd rather not. And then Bartz and Galoof try to wrestle Ferris's clothes off, at which point something slips, and they notice that Ferris is in fact a woman, but she has been living as a man because she was basically captured or rescued by pirates at a young age, and it's a male-dominated culture, so she decided to pass as male instead of deal with all the nonsense of being a woman in a pirate's world.
Yeah. Frankly, this scene is a little skeevy, but compared to other things, A, in the series, and B, in video, I don't want to single out Japanese video games, but in this case anime. I kind of will. Anime. Yeah. It comes off as pretty tame.
I agree, but I also want to point out that there's a gay panic scene in a earlier moment prior to this where the characters are like, oh, this guy is really pretty. Oh, yeah. Maybe we're into guys. Ha 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 ha.
Yeah, Bart does that for a sec.
There's a gay panic scene where homosexuality is played for laughs. I want to mention that because I hated that scene and I wish it wasn't in the game.
Yeah. Yep. It's not great.
So at this point, Ferris kind of reveals herself, and then the party's kind of set from there. You leave the ship graveyard, you walk down to a nearby town, you can upgrade your equipment again.
Wait, Ferris and there's the early hint that Ferris has some sort of relationship with Princess.
Yeah, we mentioned that the pendant, Ferris has a pendant that matches Lena's pendant.
But they see the same person that calls out to them during the Shiva thing.
Yeah, they both see their dad. Or a dad. And then you go ahead and go to the next dungeon, which is, I think it's the Drake Mountain. It's a mountain covered in this weird weed that if you step on it, you'll get poisoned.
Yeah.
Touch fuzzy, get dizzy.
Yeah, and if you go through this area, just be careful of that. There is a way to get through the entire area without getting poisoned. And then the boss is a bounty hunter and her husband. She tries to kill you and capture Lena, but Ferris saves her, and you have to fight this.
Hey, Ferris climbed up that mountain, mind you. She deserves credit for climbing up that damn mountain.
Yep, she falls down and then climbs herself up, and then she has a rope, and she lassos the rope over to the other side of the party, and then thankfully they have a stake, and they stake it to the ground, and the bad guy just lets you do it.
And this bounty hunter's just letting it happen. It's like, I'm just going to let them build a rope bridge to come over here to fight me.
Yep, and then you fight her. That fight's pretty tough. And then at the end of it, you get to the top of the mountain, and you find the last drake, and it's sick. And Lena loves animals, so she walks through the poison grass, gets poisoned, and then gives the drake this like herbal remedy that cures it. And then that's how you get the drake and your first upgrade of movement. So at this point, you can now avoid random battles as long as you've got the drake, and you can traverse over water, which lets you get to Waltz, which is the next town. It is the home of the water crystal. Before you can go to the water, you basically tell the king of Waltz, hey, you should probably, like, help us because the crystals seem to be in danger. And he's like, what, in danger?
Yeah.
No.
Dum-dums. Yeah.
Dum-dums. The crystal's been fine for millennia. It's fine. And then there is another meteor that hits, and the king goes off to check out what's going on there. And he can't save the crystal, turns out. Does someone come out of the...
There's a
meteor?
soldier.
No.
Is this the meteor that lands? There's a guy who gets teleported from the other town?
Yes. Yeah, that's the teleport one.
Yeah, this is the
right?
teleport one, but
Yeah.
not until you revisit the meteor.
Okay, cool.
So you go to the Tower of Waltz. It turns out that one of the local kind of docile animals has gone berserk. He's a real asshole.
Yeah, surprisingly hard battle.
Thing.
I guess we should talk about some of these boss battles. Some are harder than others. The ones that are really hard are the ones that can basically do like party-wide, party-sweeping attacks that you can't really prepare for. The ones that are super easy are, oddly enough, as Gino suggested, the ones that are weak to status effects, because you can just pop off one poison and, God, he's dead. Or you can pop off paralyze and just leave a character or boss paralyzed into perpetuity. So I think that's why I think that so far I've been playing this game to the best of my abilities, but incredibly, not necessarily good, not necessarily like clean, fairly sloppy, but I've been doing things like, I'm going to paralyze this boss so that they never attack. And
yeah. Can you paralyze this enemy?
There are some that you can, but like I said, that's the bosses that are the hardest are the ones that have immunities to status effects, not necessarily the ones that hit you the hardest.
Yeah,
like there's
immune to math,
there's the summon that you eventually get. What is it, Ramune, that shoots out the fish that can paralyze?
Yeah, Remora.
Like there are so many, like the game gives you so many tools, and I don't know if they kind of, I think it's not necessarily that they didn't think it through, but they give you so many tools to where you always feel like you're one step ahead of what the game gives you outside of a handful of combat moments. And oddly enough, yet again, here's another Final Fantasy game where I feel like the trash mobs are a bigger threat than the bosses.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of attrition.
Yeah.
But I will say that this game gives you a bunch of really self-sustainable jobs early, so you should be able to kind of keep going in perpetuity pretty early on. It doesn't take too much to get to that point.
But the consequence of that, and I'll just say this really quick, the consequence of that is that the jobs that you get at the beginning are incredibly straightforward and they're very easy. And then when you get the first set of the next set of jobs after that, and then the set of jobs after that, I was already like, is this a physical attack? Like, is the Mystic Mage, is the Mystic Knight, is he a knight or is he a fucking mage? Or
both.
Oh my God. See, and that's the problem. That's the problem that I ended up getting is like, I felt overwhelmed by the second crystal after the first set. I felt overwhelmed with the number of jobs.
Let's explain them then. So the water crystal, it gives you access to red mage. It's white plus black mage plus mediocre weapons, and it can't go as hard as either of them.
I love the red mage. I love the red mage, but goddamn, is it the slowest to level up? And it's such a gut punch that it levels up as slow as it does.
It has a great final ability, dual cast, which lets you cast 2 spells in a turn.
But it's like 999 AP.
It is the most expensive ability in the game.
Because it's real broken.
I'm currently grinding it right now.
Excellent. There's Time Mage, so that lets you do a bunch of time-related magic, like your haste, slow, stop, and I think gravity stuff is also Time Mage. So it's a very good support job. Summoner, this lets you summon Eidolons, and a bunch of the summons are status effects. There's some that you have to beat, and then you'll get access to those summons. They're pretty powerful. Most of the good ones you need to actually fight.
Yeah, and we should also mention that the summoner in Final Fantasy games was, let's be honest, was inserted there to just throw in extra sprite work. As like, here's a little mini cutscene. Yeah. It's super strong, but really we put this in here to show how we have a grapple of like the technological prowess of the SNES.
Yeah.
One of my favorite job combinations is to give a person. One of my favorite job combinations is to give a summoner the passive ability of barehanded from a monk, so is that the summoner just punches shit and then summons shit.
That's pretty cool. And the summoner's last ability is Call, which just calls a random summon for 0 MP, which is kind of fun. But summoner, the power of the spells is dependent on your magic stat. Same thing with your magics when you're a black mage. So actually, I think that they scale your
they
magic
scale,
stat
don't
with
they? So when
the
you equip a new
ability.
job, like it should readjust everything.
Yeah, it does. But if you're that job, it will boost your magic stat to like whatever that job's maximum is. But then if you have like one of the lower level summon passives, you won't get you would not be as good summoning as you would be if you were just a summoner. So there is a little bit of a cost of cross-pollinating. There's a reason why you want to grind up these passives, because they boost your stats as well as giving you access to the spells themselves. Yeah. Then there's Berserker. It's
straight trash. Don't use it.
It's straight trash. So it's a job where your character can only attack, and they will only attack every turn. It auto-berserks you, which makes you deal a ton of damage, though. So there are some enemies where you can just put in 4 berserkers and go to town, because you have high HP and high damage output, and they are the only job, I believe, that gets to equip axes, which is kind of fun. And then Mystic Knight, it is a combination. The best way to describe it is it's basically the sword, the spell blade from Final Fantasy IX, magic plus spell. When you have Vivi and Steiner, it's that, but the job. So you can cast a spell to enchant your sword, and then all of your physical attacks will pick up the properties of whatever spell you enchanted. And it's only black magic. So you can add, like, death to your attack. You can add stone, and that's a good way to kill certain enemies in one shot. You can add fire, and you'll deal fire elemental damage. It has a nice combination of magic plus physical attacks. And then Mime you don't get until super later, but it's technically from this crystal. So
that's right. That's the crystal you can't get. Got it.
Yeah, it's the one that's out of reach. You can get it later on in the game. So after the water crystal, it's actually pretty darn fast to get to the fire crystal. You go back to the meteor. You find that a portal has a door has opened into the meteor. You can walk into it, and there's a teleporter at the bottom floor. You can teleport from that meteor to another meteor somewhere else in the world, which it's a shame because you just got the Wind Drake, and now it's gone, basically. Yeah. But you walk to a town called Karnak. In Karnak, they are all about fire. As soon as you show up, you can go to the shop, any of the shops, and if you try to buy anything, you will end up getting arrested. But you will get to buy whatever item you were trying to buy at a hefty discount.
Really?
Yep, you buy whatever you bought.
Man, I wish I had picked a better thing that I bought. Damn it.
Yeah, I bought a ice rod, which was super good.
I think I bought the Mithril armor.
That's pretty good, too.
Yeah.
But the ice rod just lets you beat the next boss really quickly. So from here, you're put in jail because a werewolf came out of the meteor and I guess was a criminal.
You can actually free him in the previous dungeon, although the consequence is pretty nasty.
You can free a different werewolf.
Yes. I freed a different werewolf and it came to... There are consequences to freeing that werewolf, let's just say, Gino.
You freed, like, Johnny the Pickpocket, I think was that werewolf.
I freed both of the people. The first person just falls flat on his fucking face, and the other werewolf, he steals your stuff, and it's not cool. I thought I freed the right werewolf, Gino. All I'm saying is that it's like, I bet you this werewolf is actually good.
Nope. He's a pickpocket. He tells you, I'm Johnny the Pickpocket. And then if you let him out, he steals your shit. So in the Fire Town, you get arrested, but luckily your cell is next to Sid Paladina. His cell
No
is
relation.
the Sid of this game. He makes a bomb in his cell and blows up the wall between your cell and his cell. And you're introduced to him. He created a machine that amplifies the power of the fire crystal. So there's fires all over Karnak, all over the place.
Yeah.
And
people are
then
just carrying on like life is normal. There's just literally balls of fire on the ground.
Yep. The king of Karnak, or the chancellor of Karnak, comes and frees Sid and says, hey, something's wrong with the fire crystal. You're the scientist. Please help. And he says, sure, I'll help, but I need these people because they've got these sweet crystals that will let them help me. And this sends you to the fire ship, which is a ship that is capable of running without wind because it's powered by the fire crystal.
Basically an ironclad.
Yeah. You can fight your way through it. At the bottom, you find the Queen of Karnak, and she is possessed by some sort of force, and she overtaxes. Well, first she attacks you, and then she tries to take out the fire crystal. But by defeating her living flame that she creates, you stop her from destroying the fire crystal. But then when you get into the fire crystal chamber, you find that there's another soldier who also is acting weirdly, and they jack up the power on the fire crystal and cause it to overtax itself. And the werewolf that you met from earlier sacrifices himself to try and save the fire crystal, but does not succeed. After that, you have to escape from the ship and then escape through Karnak because it's super on fire.
Yes.
Yeah.
I want to say this is where I played around. Like obviously, I got to say, after playing Final Fantasy II and playing this game, I think it was Jeff that said it's really great that Final Fantasy got away from its dungeon crawl past. And I got to say, I think this game is a better kind of like balance between the dungeon crawl aspects and, the traditional overworld, like open world transitional scene format that, they started to get more towards Final Fantasy VI and VII. Because there is a lot of quality of life. Like these, unlike Final Fantasy II, all of these dungeons feel like they're deliberately designed in a way that doesn't feel malicious, because there's usually like some sort of magical pot that can heal you at the very first level, which is a godsend. And then on top of that, I'm not going to say that I think that the random encounters are great. I still think that they happen sometimes more often than they should. But there's no, like, anxiety-inducing, like, oh, my God, I got to punch out of this dungeon, otherwise it's going to be game over, and I'm going to die, I'm going to lose everything, it sucks, this is the worst, I hate this feeling. There's no, like, anxiety-inducing dungeon crawl aspects of 1 and 2, and a little bit of 3. It feels far more properly balanced.
Yeah, I guess what I mean by dungeon crawl is, like, that sort of very early CRPG, sort of, like, sub-wizardry kind of random dungeon generated feeling, which the Final Fantasies 1 and 2 definitely had. Like Final Fantasy V feels very authored. Like Gino was talking about that, walking through those like ships in that cave, and it being this very good like tutorial, like well thought out space, and it kind of felt like you had a very good dungeon master. Sorry, my cat's screaming.
It's adorable.
Who's like walking you through like a first dungeon, basically being like, oh, here's an opportunity to test out this thing. I didn't know it could do that.
Yeah,
and like that authored feeling ties very directly into this fire dungeon as you escape, because it's the coolest thing.
It's such a cool
awesome.
level.
I love it.
Yeah, there are a bunch of treasure chests that have monsters in them, and if you defeat the monsters, you get the treasure that's inside.
But you only have 10 minutes.
You only have 10 minutes, and you're getting attacked by this soldier who caused all the problems. And he will run away at the last second if you try to fight him normally. But you can actually kill him in those battles.
Before he transforms.
And if you do.
But you kind of don't want to, because he has a pretty good blue magic spell that you actually want to learn.
Yeah, it turns out that it was
monster?
not a soldier of Karnak. He was a mercenary named Deathclaw.
Which is
Or
later a random
Iron Claw.
encounter.
Yeah, he's Iron Claw. The Death Claws are later on. But he teaches you can learn the ability Death Claw from him, which is really good.
If you get that during this stage of the game, it's very useful, especially in some of the boss fights, because, again, a lot of the boss fights are vulnerable to paralyze. On top of
doesn't that one also just set your enemy's HP?
it sets them to
critical?
a single digit. So even the highest level of HP, if it can hit, it will lower them to at minimum 9 HP, which is ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous.
Yep, it's awesome.
The other thing that I
broken.
kind of had a lot of fun with, so there's like the Iron Soldiers, and in an earlier level, I think in the Ice stage or the Ice level, there's always an Ice level, there's always a Lava level. This is the Lava level. There are those weird soldiers that you fight that kind of just look like random soldiers. You can steal from them, and if you steal from them, you get at least one Mithril sword. Yeah. And if you stock up on Mithril swords, which I did, it's like 400 Gs. And so at my stage of the game, the economy is totally broken.
Awesome.
It's totally broken. I think I just recently got the Black Chocobo. I did the thing where there's like guns on the thing. And I have still at least 18,000 Gs. Because I just kept getting all these Mithril swords, selling them for 400
We call
ditties.
them gil in this country.
Oh, okay. Okay. But, yeah, there's
Those people and their dollars.
So, I gotta say, credit to the person whoever did the enemy designs here, did a really good job in Final Fantasy V. I'm gonna go ahead and look at these credits. Oh, hey, it's your favorite person in the world. Monsters were designed by Tetsuya Nomura. It's your favorite person in the world, Gino. He did good work.
Oh, wow.
Give him credit. Give him
so
credit.
That's the thing that
Say
he
a nice
did.
thing.
That's the thing that he did that earned him carte blanche to ruin the next decade plus.
It turns out when he's got a supervisor, I've always seen him as a sort of like the horrible wrestle man.
Vince
Vinny,
McMahon?
No.
Oh, Vince Russo.
Vince Russo-esque character.
Or George Lucas.
Or George Lucas, with moderation, can be fine. When someone's standing above him being like, get rid of some of the zippers and we're good. And when someone isn't standing there, you get Final Fantasy 15 taking forever, and Final Fantasy 13 taking a decade, and like this sort of shit.
Judy Bagwell on a forklift.
Judy Bagwell on a forklift. So, anyway, yeah, Nomura did the monster art. It's not bad.
Great monster designs.
Yeah.
They're really good.
So that dungeon is very fun to get through, and is unique in the series.
Yeah, guess who made the mistake of spending a little too much time going through treasure chests, and it's like, oh, I've got 30 seconds left. I've got 30 seconds left. I bet I'll be fine. And so, oh, wait, there's a boss battle. Son of a what?
Poor
and
bastard. That's
where I actually had to redo a lot of work because the autosave set me back to immediately before the boss battle.
Oh, pants.
Smart.
Um,
And so I would say I spent at least 10 minutes seeing, can I beat this boss in 30 seconds? And the answer is no. Also, I just want to talk about it because it is a weird thing. The quick save feature in this game is probably the weirdest thing I've ever seen my entire life in terms of quick saving. So, Gino, you don't have this feature, but Jeff and I do. So when you quick save, it immediately boots you to the menu. And it says, it even warns you, it says, upon resuming, this quick save will be deleted. So once you hit resume, the quick save immediately deletes itself.
That's only way in Gino's version of the game.
Oh, it is?
Yeah. Or it's pretty close. The way the PS1 does it's basically that. You can go back to that scratch save. I forget what they call it.
The memo file.
It's pretty similar.
What a weird system. Like, they couldn't just do the old school, like, F2 to quick save. Like,
well, they wanted to make it a little, like, on handhelds, it kind of made a certain amount of sense.
Sure.
On the PlayStation 1, I've always found it a little weird, because, like, presumably, I don't know, like, the scenario for that is, like, I don't know, your 45 minutes are up, Donahue's coming on, or, like, whatever. It's like, Mom, so I like
that it lets you cheese through some areas by using the quick save, and I don't mind that it requires me to actually get to a save point if I want to stop playing. But obviously, it would be a little bit nicer if they did. It's obviously nicer than the original version of the game, which you only got to use save points. So the fire crystal, once it explodes, it gets you access to, and I'm going to talk about both sets of jobs because this is kind of our stopping point.
Yeah.
It kind of gives it to you in 2 bursts, but the ninja job, which lets you dual wield, which is dope, and it lets you use some ninja weapons. You can get smoke, which lets you escape from battles 100% of the time. Image, which gives you after images, which will absorb, I think, 2 or 3 physical attacks, and then you just won't take those attacks. They'll miss. Preemptive attack, which lets you go first. Throw, which lets you throw weapons at your enemies. And dual wield, which lets any job dual wield. As long as the weapon is not two-handed like a bow. You get Ranger.
You get the Ranger after the Black Chocobo, not during this.
Yeah,
part.
but that's
okay. Sorry.
I'm from the Fire Crystal.
Sure.
So the Ranger gives you aim, which shoots a shot that never misses. You can call upon fuzzy woodland creatures, which is pretty cool.
Basically, the druid from D&D.
Huh.
This Ranger is basically the druid.
Yeah. Then you get aim, I think. You get equip bows so that any character can equip bows, and then rapid fire, which lets you attack 4 targets in 1 turn, but each shot hits a random target, and it's less damaging than a normal attack.
And it scales. If you have 2 weapons, each one of them gets 4 attacks.
Yes, it's very dope.
This is the other unspoken dark magic of Final Fantasy V, is taking that plus dual wield with like end level or end game swords. I intend to do that. It's going to take a minute.
Excellent. Geomancer, which is a job that gets the ability to draw power from the land. It speaks for the trees. Geomancer can equip bells, which is a very unique weapon.
It's for those that don't know, this character is completely modeled in a giant reference to Tom Bombadil from The Lord of the Rings.
Oh, okay. I did not pick up on
his clothing and like this entire class is a reference to Tom Bombadil. Like that's the first thing that I noticed. It's like, oh, he wears this is Tom Bombadil.
Cool. Well, the innate abilities with Geomancer are Find Hole and Anti-Trap, so you can just see holes all the time when you're a Geomancer, and you can disarm traps. There's very few trapped treasure chests, but this is the job that lets you get around it. You get Earth, which just summons the power of terrain to damage the enemies. So depending on where you are, you will do a different type of attack, which is kind of interesting. It's especially useful in some areas and obviously much worse in others. And the higher your level, the stronger earth magics you can use. And then you can get Find Hole and Anti-Trap, which just gives other characters the ability to have those abilities. It's more of a passive job that you occasionally want for specific dungeons. Beastmaster lets you seize control of some enemies. So like you can tame them and then you can control them as though they're a member of your party. You can catch some enemies if they're wounded, and then you can unleash them on enemies. And when you unleash them, they will do a specific, like, super powerful attack for you. It's, like, single use.
It's useful if you're really obsessed. So, Jeff, if you really do go down the Grindfather thing, that this is how you get all of the blue magic abilities. But don't.
Yeah, I've already started using it a little bit.
No, don't hurt yourself, Jeff. Don't get everything.
Look, I don't plan on getting everything.
Oh, thank God.
But I am going to use it a couple times. I already have.
Nice.
Okay.
You get Tame, which lets you stop certain enemies, and then Control. And then you can equip Whips, which is the special weapon for Beastmasters. Bard is a very cool job. It gets you the ability to play songs, and once you start singing, you will just kind of keep singing for a few turns, and almost all of the abilities for Bard are passives. Like, you can heal everyone, you can boost everyone's strength, you can boost their defense. The real tricky one is there's a song that boosts your team's levels, and that's a way to cheat. So, like, you can sing that song a few times, and then your whole party will be level 99, regardless of what their starting level was. And then they'll deal damage as if they were level 99. And that's the job that playing all the pianos will give you access to, an extra song.
All right. Now,
and those are all the jobs from these
from
Fire
this
Crystal.
section. So I just want to put this out here, Gino. Something that eventually I want you to think about. Maybe the final episode before we rank this game. I want you to think about if you made a Final Fantasy job tier list from like S to possibly all the way down to F. Like, think about what it is. I want you to think about this. Like,
In just this game or across
in
all
this
Final
game,
Fantasies?
in this game, like a
Oh, I
tier
can
list.
already do that.
Really?
Yeah.
All right, let's go. Do you have time for this?
Okay. Yes, it'll be pretty quick
So
because.
S tier. What are your S tier jobs?
So are we assuming we have access to every job, or
Yeah.
this is a 4-job fiesta?
Let's do every job, if that's okay with you, and
Sure.
I will allow
Okay,
you
so-
to not do the advanced jobs, the Game Boy Advance jobs.
S tier jobs are chemist,
Yep, I remember this from
Mage.
your 4-job fiesta. Blue Mage?
chemist and blue mage. I think are the S tier jobs. Blue mage because of death by math. Chemist lets you manipulate levels very extremely.
So now we're
and it's
moving down
also
to
super
A
powerful.
tier, because these are just totally broken. You can beat the game no matter what.
Yeah, those are the S tier ones.
Okay.
I could throw white mage there too. Like you can beat the game as long as you have a white mage, but it's not dominant. It's got strong fundamentals.
Yes.
It is the Tim
okay,
Duncan
so you want to
of
put White
jobs.
Mage as the lowest S tier?
It's probably A tier. Like,
Okay, so
it's
top
just
A
solid.
tier.
Like you can just beat the game with that.
Okay, other A
I would
tiers.
say that ninja, bard is pretty good. That probably should go there because of the ability to manipulate levels. I think Mystic Knight is probably A tier because of the ability to just insta kill some bosses. Ranger's pretty good because that ×4 hit, and those are probably all the B tier jobs
At
that
A
jump
tier.
out to me.
So B tier next.
Or the A tiers. Then the B tiers, you've got your
Red Mage?
your knight, your monk, red mage, black mage, summoner. Actually, I think summoner should probably be A tier. I think
Okay.
it's better than the black mage. And then
C tier.
Beastmaster trainer is probably in B tier too.
Okay.
Like there's a lot of stuff in B tier.
Okay.
Samurai is probably in B tier. Dancer as well.
Ooh. So now we get into C tier, like slightly. You really got to put in time if you want to get anything out of this.
Yeah, so C tier is probably your thief. Because it's not very good.
Time Magic, Time Mage. I don't think if you said
Time Mage actually should have been in B tier.
Okay.
B tier or A tier. Thief is probably in C tier.
Mime.
Berserker. Mime is for high level stuff. It's kind of its own thing because
Okay.
you only ever use Mime.
You're really
when
going to put
doing broken
Berserker
ones.
in C tier, not D tier or F tier?
Yeah, because Berserker has some uses. Like there's some specific fights where it's good. Like there's no just complete trash job in this.
So
game.
you're going to
They're all
not give
useful for
anyone a
something.
D.
I think the only one that's probably a D is Geomancer, I would say.
Yeah,
Just because Geomancer is useful, like actively useful, in I think one dungeon, and
Yeah.
even there it's not great.
I'm literally grinding Geomancer to get like the 2 abilities that are kind of useful, and then I'm never doing it again. Like it's going on one character, and it's just going to be a hot swap. I need this right now, and then turn it off. Thing.
Yeah, but Thief is really only useful for underflow. There's an item duping trick that it's useful for, and quality of life stuff. But as a job to beat enemies, it's terrible. But I think that's the tier list. I think it's Blue Mage and Chemist up top, no contest. And then there's a bunch of... Oh, and Dragoon is probably also in the B tier. There's a bunch of jobs that in A tier just are slightly more efficient or have broken applications on top of being fair and pretty strong. The B tier is pretty much all jobs that are just straightforward. They do one thing and they're decent at it, but don't have many free wins in them. And then C tier are jobs that are only useful in like 1 or 2 contexts, and outside of them, they're trash.
Okay.
So there you go.
All right.
That's my guess. And listeners, if you have a tier list as well, or think my tier list is poor, go ahead and write in. But I think that's it for our first foray into Final Fantasy V.
So where do you want us to go next? So we're going to say we basically stopped at the Fire Crystal. The good news is it's normally the next podcast. We can just jump into the story, the levels, and that sort of thing.
Yeah, so I don't want to spoil things.
So can you give us a hint? What's a Name the color of the character or like what. Give us a hint.
When you meet a young girl,
Okay.
you'll meet a young girl who's very important, and it's very significant when you meet her, and you'll know when you meet her.
You sound like Kung Pao.
Yes.
It will be significant.
It will be significant. Oh, I love that.
Fun fact before we go, in a very fun Final Fantasy V animal fact thing. So the PlayStation 1 release, the physical release, the black label version of it, not the greatest hits one, apparently has issues with certain late models of the PlayStation 3, where if you play a single session of Final Fantasy V, save the game, continue playing, and try to save again, it'll hardlock. That doesn't affect the greatest hits version. So there's a fun animal fact for you.
Oh, another fun animal fact, you can totally lose the black chocobo if you play the original NES version and be stuck in perpetuity, and there's no way to fix it.
Cool.
Very cool. Well, that's going to be it for Final Fantasy V for our first foray into it. Thank you, ZP.
The cow goes moo.
Thank you, Jeff.
My nipples look like milk duds.
Thank you, listeners. Just a reminder, if you want to get in touch with the show, you can do so at DeepListensPod, deeplistens.libsyn.com. That's where our comment sections live, and deeplistenspodcast@gmail.com is our email address. You can support the show on patreon.com/deeplistens. I'm sorry. There will be more podcasts in the future. Thank you for listening. Peace.
Oh, man. I've got some yellow liquid for your popcorn, and it's non-dairy. It's a great movie.
I'll talk to y'all later. I need to go to bed.
Hey, go to bed.
I need to go lie down.